Hello, my name is Jacqueline, and today's video is part of a short series I'm doing on moving harps. And today I wanted to talk about a lot of different ways to move your harp across a distance, whether that's carrying your harp or wheeling your harp on some sort of harp cart or harp dolly. And as you can see, I have my 3 different size harps here with me, a Heartland Lyra, a Lion & Healy Troubadour, and a Lion & Healy Style 30 full-size pedal harp. So I'll use all 3 of these harps, and I have a couple of different carts, and really I'm going to try to show a lot of different options for ways that you can move your harp. And hopefully, regardless of what size of harp you have and whether or not you have a cart or different ways to move it, this will give you lots of ideas for how you can go about safely moving your harp. I do have separate videos about covering and uncovering the harp, so I will not be showing that today. And I also have a video that will be forthcoming about loading harps in and out of vehicles, so that also will not be covered today. But as I said, we're going to be talking about carrying and wheeling harps in all kinds of different ways. Carrying a harp of this size is quite straightforward, as this is quite a small harp. It's just 30 inches tall, or 76 centimeters, and it weighs about 9 pounds or 4 kilograms. But even though it's so small and there's a lot of different ways that you can carry it, sometimes people do have questions. One of the most straightforward ways to pick it up is just to grab onto each side and lift straight up. So there I'm putting one hand around the column, and then on the other side we have the sound holes, so I'm going ahead and tucking a hand in there, and then you can pick it up quite easily and just walk with it like this. That works really well. Another option would be to have it on its back and to carry it more in a sideways position. So then again, I'm using the column for one hand and the other hand underneath, but now it's just a bit more horizontal. And some people, even with a light harp, carry it this way, but just by the column alone. So you could do that, like if you had to walk for a bit of a distance, that would be a pretty comfortable way to carry this harp. So now we have the same harp, but it's in its bag, all covered up and ready to be carried like this. And there are 2 main options for this. One is there are these handles here, so you could just pick it up like that and carry it like so. Also, this cover has a shoulder strap, so you could slide the harp up onto your shoulder and carry it like this, kind of like just a bag over the shoulder. And both of those work quite well. There's a couple things to keep in mind. This type of cover is fairly popular for lever harps, and especially if you have a lever harp that's quite a bit larger than this one. When you're carrying it in either of those positions, you want to just be aware of how long the harp is coming out along your side, especially if it's on your shoulder. Sometimes I've seen young harpists where they feel so comfortable that they might turn suddenly and then the whole harp swings and can bump into something, which is obviously not great. And then another cause for concern, especially if the harp is a bit longer, is going through doorways. If the harp is swinging around a bit or kind of gets behind you like this, you might not fit through a doorway. So anytime you're approaching a doorway, I would just slow down and really be aware of the starting and end point of your harp to make sure that you're fitting through smoothly. So even though this harp is quite a bit larger than the last one, you can still carry it in the same basic ways. Just for reference, this harp is about 65 inches tall, or 166 centimeters, and it weighs 38 pounds or 17 kilograms. So you can, again, just lift it straight up with a hand on the column and a hand around the back. Whoops, it's a bit noisy. Again, there are these sound holes in the back that you can really use helpfully to get a good grip on this side of the harp. So I'm just going to grab in the front and the back and lift straight up. And you could walk for a ways with the harp like this. It is a little awkward, so I wouldn't walk terribly far distances, but if you need to go across a room or something, that can work quite well. And then if you wanted to carry it a longer distance, again, a horizontal turn to the harp can really be quite helpful. So I'll put my hands in basically the same spots, but I'll just tip it forward like this, and then you could walk along with the harp like this. And again, wanting to be very careful about the top and the bottom of the harp and where they are in relation to how you're moving. Here we have the harp in its cover, and you can use the same basic methods for carrying it. And obviously the cover protects the harp quite well, but one challenge to this type of cover is that it can be difficult to get a good grip on the harp for carrying it. So usually what I do is I just undo a little small amount of the Velcro at the front so that I can reach in and actually grasp the wood of the harp. And then around the back, I kind of bunch up the cover a little bit so that there's some room to really grip in there and have a firm grip on the sound holes. And once you've done those two things, it's pretty easy just to carry it, vertically again like so. Or if you want to do the horizontal carry, you can do that as well. One small point is that because I play the harp, I very rarely wear jewelry on my hands, so that's never a concern for me in grasping the wood of the harp or anything. But if you do have some sort of metallic jewelry on your hands, you might want to take that off first so as not to risk scratching the wood. Now, if you find yourself needing to carry a harp like this over a sizable distance, one option is the two-person carry, and that is just putting the harp into a horizontal position and using two people to distribute the weight. So with the help of my assistant here, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll tip the harp forward, and then she'll take the top of the harp, I'll take the bottom of the harp, and then you could just walk along like this. And then when you arrive, you could go ahead and gently set the bottom back down, and then can you go ahead and tip it up like so. And that would be a two-person horizontal carry. So with a harp this size, if you need to transport it over fairly long distances, you might decide that it's easier just to wheel it on a cart. And so I have here a harp cart, sometimes also called a harp dolly. This is quite a standard type of cart with the two large wheels. And these work really well for moving harps around. If you've never done it before, putting the harp onto the cart is a little bit tricky. So generally what I do is I have one hand on the cart, one hand on the harp like so, and then a foot on the cart to keep that from moving around. And then you have to tip your harp forward, much further forward than you think you should. So it's really resting on the front 2 feet, and there's lots of space underneath the back 2 feet. And then you want to keep the cart nice and steady, and also really in a vertical position so it doesn't pop up like this. And then you just slide the cart underneath the feet until the feet are all the way back on the cart and everything is resting there. So then your harp is on the cart and you want to go ahead and buckle it in. Most carts have 2 buckles, one here around the middle and then another one down low around the base of the harp. This is quite an old cart, so I'm not sure if it used to have another buckle and it disappeared at some point or what. But obviously if you have 2 buckles, you'll want to use them both. And now that your harp is all nice and secure, when you're actually wheeling, usually I keep one hand on the cart at all times and one hand wrapped around the harp. That way I have a good grip on both. And then I use my foot when I'm tipping everything back, and then I go ahead and rest the harp here on my shoulder. So I still have the hand on the cart, hand on the harp, and the harp is resting on my shoulder. And then you can just go ahead and walk along with the harp like so. Usually when you're moving a harp, you'll just walk forwards, but once in a while you might need to wiggle into a spot and go backwards. You can also turn pretty easily. Obviously you don't want to go too fast, but that's not all that difficult to be turning around a bit. And of course with things like corners or narrow spaces, you'll just want to go slowly and be checking on both sides, making sure that everything is fitting well. When you're all set, you can go ahead and take the harp off the cart. So again, I'd put a foot on the cart when you're setting the harp back down on the floor, making sure that everything stays really nice and stable. And then you can just unbuckle, and then it's the opposite of what you did before. So you'll tip the harp forward just a small amount here because it's already slightly tipped. And then with the foot on the cart, pull it out from underneath and set the harp down, and you're all set. So here we have a full-size pedal harp. It is 73 inches tall, or 185 centimeters, and it weighs about 81 pounds, or 37 kilograms. So when I'm moving this harp around, most of the time, I go ahead and put the harp on its cart and I wheel it. But there are a couple of ways that I move it without the cart. Generally, I don't lift it and carry it, but there's a couple of other ways that you can do it. One way is that sometimes I walk the harp. And the pedal harp has 4 feet on the bottom that it rests on. So if you put one hand back here securely in the sound hole for a grip, and you grab onto the column with the other hand, you can tilt the harp back so it's just resting on the back 2 feet, not at all on the front 2 feet. And then you can go back and forth, shifting from one foot to the other to walk it like so. Or you could come, walking back in the other direction. And you can cover short distances like that. Generally, I use that for 2 different situations. One is if I'm somewhere and my cart is kind of far away and I don't want to bother with it. So, for example, maybe I'm all set up at an orchestra rehearsal and I've already moved my cart off the stage, and then it turns out that I need to move a little ways. I'll just go ahead and stand up and walk my harp, a couple feet over into the new position. But the other possibly more practical application is that sometimes the ground might be uneven. For example, you could be playing in an opera pit, and a lot of times a pit is very crowded. Frequently there's a lot of cables running everywhere for stand lights and things, and so it might not be terribly easy to wheel your harp even if you wanted to. And then you can really get over some rough ground with that, since you're rocking back and forth, and you can really position where each foot is going to come down. So that is walking the harp. So another way that you could move a harp like this without a cart is to slide it. And some pedal harps actually have wheels in the base of the harp to facilitate sliding. So in that instance, you would not have your covers on, and you could just tip the harp onto the wheels and slide it that way. This harp does not have any wheels, and usually I find it slides best in its covers. So here it is all covered up, and then it's really very straightforward. You just get a good grip on the harp, and I kind of use my leg too, and you can slide it quite easily on flat surfaces. Going backwards, I guess I do a little bit more of a wiggle, but there's all kinds of ways that you can move it around like this to really position it well, maybe after you've covered a longer distance with the harp on a cart. So if for some reason you do find yourself needing to carry a pedal harp and you can't use your cart, this doesn't come up very often, but once in a while it does. Sometimes I've had to move my harp over a distance that might be too narrow to fit my cart. And a few times I've had to take my harp up and down spiral staircases, which is definitely a challenge, my least favorite kind of staircase. So in those kinds of instances where I have to carry my harp for a ways, usually I get a second person to help. And a few things to know about this. This type of cover has these handholds. As I was showing with the troubadour harp, it can be difficult to get a good grip, but these are designed so that you can get a good grip. You can just open this Velcro flap here and then reach right in on this side. And then similarly on this side, you can open this here and reach right in, and your column cover even has a flap there too so that you can get a grip. And so what I would do in this instance with 2 people carrying the harp is I would have one person on this side carrying the column side, and then I would have one person on this side carrying this side of the harp. And if you both just boost straight up at the same time, then you can walk along together carrying the harp. It's kind of slow progress, but it can work if you're in a situation where you don't have another great way to carry the harp. So as I've mentioned, most of the time when I'm moving my pedal harp, I go ahead and wheel it on its cart. And this is my preferred harp cart here. You'll see that it has 6 wheels, 3 on each side, and that's for going up and down stairs, which I'll demonstrate shortly. But for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and put the harp on the cart using the same method as before. And this cart does have 2 sets of straps, one around the base like this, and this other one. Usually I buckle this one kind of across the harp rather than all the way out and around the outside. You can do it either way. Sometimes it's a matter of preference. Sometimes the length of the strap on the cart will dictate which way you do it. And then I'll just make sure that the harp is really nicely all the way back on the cart there, and then keeping a foot on the cart. I will go ahead and tip it back, and I'm all set to move the harp on the cart. So if you're wheeling a pedal harp, it's just the same as wheeling a smaller harp. You've got the harp on the shoulder, a hand on the cart, hand on the harp, and generally when you're moving, you just walk forward with the harp. Now, when you're wheeling a harp around, nice, straight, flat surfaces are the easiest kind of terrain to wheel on. But of course, there are many places that are not quite like that. There's all kinds of corners and little, narrow passageways and things. So I think one area of particular concern are doorways. And when it comes to wheeling a harp through a doorway, a harp will fit through a normal sized doorway. And the width of a normal doorway is plenty large enough to accommodate a full-size pedal harp like this one. Sometimes when I'm going places, if there are double doors, people are rushing to open both doors for me, and you don't really need that. You can fit just fine width-wise, although I do make a point of checking on both sides of the harp before I approach a doorway to make sure just that I'm centered well. It can be easy, since you're on this side of the harp, to just be focused on where this side of the harp is and forget about this other side over there. And then you do also have to keep an eye on the top of a doorway. Again, a regular sized doorway is no problem for a harp to fit through, but there's a surprising number of doorways out there that aren't quite as tall as it seems like they should be. And so then you run the risk of the top of the harp bumping into the top of the doorway. So if you feel like you're approaching a doorway that's a little bit short, what you need to do is you need to make your harp also a little bit short. And all you do to do that is you just lean it back further, and that makes the whole thing more able to sneak through a low doorway. Now, another cause for concern with doorways is the door itself. Right here, we're in the doorway going from my garage into my house. I know it's very scenic. And this door obviously stays open. It's no problem. But so frequently in public places, doors do not stay open on their own. And that's one of the things I find most annoying about moving my harp, actually. I don't find it too tricky to move it in and out of the car and in all kinds of different wheeling situations. But doors that don't stay open can be a bit of a challenge. So there's a few things you can do with that. One, if someone is around, you can just have them hold the door. Always a great option. Two, you can carry a doorstop. Some harpists carry a doorstop, so then they can just obviously very efficiently wedge the door and hold it open. Frequently what I do actually is I use my bag. Usually I have a large bag with all of my music and extra strings and things, and so I just use that as sort of an impromptu doorstop to hold doors open. But anyway, this door obviously is nicely wide open, and the reason I wanted to show this particular doorway is because it has this little lip here that you'll see down at the bottom. And again, when you start moving a harp, you notice all things about doorways. Such lips are very common, and they're a bit annoying with a harp. If it's really nice and flat, then you can just sail through the doorway, after checking to make sure everything's all centered and everything, of course. But with a lip like this, you have to do a little bit of extra work. So generally, if you have any kind of rough ground, like let's say that you're wheeling down a sidewalk and part of the sidewalk is kind of worn away and it's rough, in that scenario or this one, you want to wheel your harp backwards. So most of the time when I'm wheeling, I'm just going forwards, but when it comes to something that's difficult to get over, I go ahead and flip the harp around so that I'm coming at it backwards. And then with a bit of a lip like this, you also want to make sure that your wheels are approaching it really evenly. You'll see I'm back to my other harp card. I just wanted to show a variety of cards. So I'm going to make sure that both of my wheels come up to the lip at the same time and that they're both firmly on the lip, and then I'll just give the harp kind of a firm tug backwards to get up and over the lip like this. And there we go. That's how you go over a lip or rough ground. When it comes to moving a harp up and down stairs, generally I just go ahead and do this by myself, and I don't find it all that difficult, especially with the assistance of my six-wheel cart, which I really like for this. And anytime that you're taking a harp upstairs, you always want to approach it backwards, the same way that I was just showing that you would go backwards over rough ground. When you're going up the stairs, you're always taking the harp backwards and pulling it up. And so then what I do is not dissimilar to just wheeling regularly. I keep one hand on the cart, one hand on the harp. I tilt the whole thing back. And then I really use my legs when I'm doing this, so I have kind of a nice bend here so that my legs can be doing a lot of the lifting. And you want to make sure that your harp is all nicely lined up so that both wheels are, evenly approaching the stairs. And then you just give the whole thing kind of a boost up like so, and then you can keep going on to the next stairs. Oh, and you can see as I'm doing this that the three wheels, they're flipping to climb each stair. That's really the innovative part of this design. So now to come back downstairs, the harp is going to come forward. So it's always opposite going up. You bring the harp up backwards, and coming back down, you always bring the harp forward. And it's a similar idea. Again, you want to really use your legs as you're moving the harp down the stairs. It's also very important that you make sure that the wheels are approaching each step simultaneously. You don't want to come in with one wheel before the other, or the whole harp will get off kilter and start to tip. And then also coming downstairs, the harp really has a tendency to kind of drop to the next step. It really, because it's fairly heavy, wants to move down to that next step quite quickly. So it takes a fair amount of restraint, really having a good grip on the harp and kind of easing it down to the next step, I find is what works best for this. So I will go ahead and demonstrate the harp coming down a few steps. So I've got it on my shoulder, and then I'm pushing it out, making sure the wheels are both going to hit the step evenly, and then really easing it from one step to the next, kind of just very gently lowering down like so. Now, as with many things, because I've done this so much, I might be making it look a bit easier than it is, moving a harp up and down stairs by yourself. And obviously, I don't mind doing this. I'll take my harp up and down a full flight of stairs. It's no problem for me. But many people prefer to move a harp with a second person when they're going up and down stairs. And that can be a really helpful option, especially if the second person has a good grasp on what their role is. And it's quite similar to moving a harp up and down stairs solo. One person remains behind the harp, just like I showed, but then you add a second person in the front of the harp, moving and adjusting the base of the harp. Now, with the help of my assistant here, we're going to go ahead and take the harp up and down a step so you can see how that second person would be at the base of the harp. And really, their job is just to give the harp a gentle boost up and down the steps to kind of lessen the amount of work that you have to do at the top of the harp. You do want to make sure that your assistant is not overly enthusiastic. Sometimes an overly enthusiastic assistant will give the harp such a big boost that they'll take the whole thing off the cart, and that can really be a scary moment. But here we go, so we'll both get into place. You can see that she's just kind of wrapping around the base here, and then I'm going to count us off, and we'll go up one step. 1, 2, 3. Like so, and then if you were going to come back down, you do the same thing. So she'll just be kind of gently easing the harp down to the lower step. Here we go, 1, 2, 3. And that is how you would move a harp up and down steps with 2 people. So I hope this has given you a lot of ideas about moving your harp, whether you have a large harp or a small harp, whether you're going to carry it or wheel it or use some combination. Hopefully you have a good sense of how you will go about it. Good luck to you, and thanks so much for watching.